I'm building a 2-trailer tiny house. It's time for a build update. Let's go back to that bracing issue for that end structure that supports my swinging walls. In a previous video, I touched on the challenge of bracing up the end structure that supports my swinging walls. Because it's an open void, I can't put any cross bracing in to shore it up and support those side walls. Before I explain what I've done, let's first look at the problem. And to do that, I'm going to explain bracing. Here we have our stud wall, so named because it's made by a stud. Our stud wall. We've got a top plate, a bottom plate, and our studs that go between them. And normally there'd be noggins in between here to shore up the studs, but I haven't bothered on this piece. The problem that we're trying to combat is racking. Racking is the tendency for the building to push out of plumb based on the forces that are applied to it. Most commonly wind shear, and for us tiny houses, hurtling down the road. As there's forces applied to this wall, we can see it's quite sturdy. But as more forces are applied, we start to get movement in the wall. So that could be wind shear, it could be traveling down the road and hitting the brakes, it could be hitting a bridge, don't recommend that. But you can see it starts to push our wall out of square. What we're trying to stop with bracing is to stop that movement in our walls, stop the racking, stop lateral movement. The really interesting thing is in tiny houses, because we basically have this rectangle tube, we can get torsional forces as well. And that's where the roof is moving on an independent plane to the trailer. So we get the roof twisting, which is twisting our walls back and forth, something we really don't want to happen. What you'll notice is as I push this wall here, these diagonals are elongating or compressing. So when I push this way, we can see this diagonal elongates and this diagonal compresses. So to combat that, we can actually put in diagonal cross bracing that'll stop that movement. Here we have our stud wall that's used metal strapping to put in diagonal cross bracing to shore up this wall. Now, metal strapping isn't the strongest of the bracing systems, but I've used it because it's the lightest and it's quite easy to work with. So I put in my diagonal bracing. I can use tensioners that tension up each one of these, which allow me to pull it into square. Just like when our wall is racking, our diagonals are elongating or compressing, we can compress or elongate a diagonal until they're the same to square up our wall. So by using these tensioners, we can fine tune the square, but also by putting tension on both of these, locks this wall in nice and tight. So now you'll see when I push on this wall, there is no movement at all. What's happening is as I go to push this way, it's trying to elongate this diagonal, and this strap here is resisting it. Another popular system is brace board. Brace board is nailed over the studs from the top plate to the bottom plate and into the vertical studs to lock up the wall. Now this is OSB brace board. I would actually recommend using ply if you can. The only reason is it's lighter, and I actually think it has a better rating, but I don't know offhand. Brace board has a better rating than metal strap bracing. The reason for that is as opposed to just two diagonal points holding the wall square, you have a whole sheet where all the forces are being distributed. So we've got our nail and a diagonal here, but this nail is pulling against all of the other nails across the sheet. So those racking forces that have been applied to this wall being distributed across the sheet. So they give a better rating, but it does add more weight to the project. What's really important is when you're nailing this stuff in, or more importantly, metal strap bracing, use the right nails. These look like clouts that you're going to buy in the nail section. They are clouts, they're not the same. Two key differences. They're ringed to stop them pulling out of the timber. And the major difference is they have a reinforced head and they're stronger. Normal clouts, the heads will pop off. You might not find these in the nail section. They're more likely to be with the bracing. They do cost more. Don't argue, just get them. If you're going to bother doing bracing, which you absolutely should, use the right damn nail. The other benefit these bracing systems gives to our walls is stop them from pulling apart and going pow, 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 pow. Unlike our stud wall here, where all we've got is nails driven to the end of timbers, which is easy as to pull out. These walls, the top plate here and the bottom plate are held together with a bracing system. In this case, we have the two plates held together with a brace board that goes from top to bottom, and on our metal strap bracing, we have strap bracing going up over the top of the top plate and underneath the base plate. If you're doing your wall in your tiny house, don't just finish the strap on the face of these top and base plate. They can pull out, can pull the nail sideways. If you bring the strap over the top and nail down to the face of the plates, you'll stop it pulling apart. So when you fix it down to the trailer, you know that whatever is attached to this top plate is not going to rip off when you get compression inside the house or updrafts. Also really important, and I've talked about this in a previous video, when you attach your trusses or your rafters on top of these, they must be fixed adequately down to this top plate so they can't lift off the top plate also. Now let's have a look at the actual issue. So this is a better representation of the end of my trailer. My house continues through and I have swinging walls coming off of the end of this structure. But in my case, these are steel metal posts that are welded to the base of my trailer. It has a structuring up the top here, which has actually been designed to try and take out some of that movement, but it hasn't taken out enough. The problem is I can't brace this because this is part of the house. If we look at the house as a system, we've got my side walls here, which are nice and braced up. They're held plumb this way by bracing, both metal strap bracing and OSB brace board I've used to stop them moving back and forth. So they're nice and plumb. But the problem I have, because this end structure here is not being held plumb, it can move back and forth. And these walls here, the only thing holding these things vertical is this structure. So the whole end of the structure can flex. Now, how do I combat that? I can't put in those diagonal bracings. But what I can do is to look at this house as a system and think about it as a 3D structure. So I have my end wall here, which is nice and braced up. This here is holding the ends of these side walls nice and tight. The base of my house is held square by the steel structure of the trailer. So all I need to be doing is to stop this piece here moving back and forth, which is in essence what I'd be doing with strap bracing. The other way I can do that is by strapping out from these corners to these corners, because I get that same rectangle that I'm bracing up with strap bracing. So by doing that, because when I move this way and I move, so when I move this way and I move this way, I'm creating elongation of this angle and an elongation of this angle. So by strapping that up, I can hold this rectangle here square. The base is already square, and because everything else is locked up, I can hopefully stop this top piece moving back and forth, which will square up that end and take out that lateral movement that I've got in my house. So now that you can see how I'm going to try and brace up that end structure to take out that movement, let's go have a look on the house. I've had to race through bracing and how to go about it. So if you do have questions, because there's a bit more to it, please ask in the comments down below and I'll respond to you if I can. Also, if you see something in this video that can be improved or a better explanation of bracing, or you know about some other methods that would help, please comment down below and I'll respond to those. So I'm in the main trailer of the tiny house and I'm prototyping the bracing I'm going to use on the roof here to try and take the movement out of that end structure. There's two lots of bracing that I can try. One is a ply bracing, which I'll brace up all of my trusses. Now that does give a better rating, but it's going to add about 40 kilos to my project and I'll have to wait a month for it to come in or go to the city and get some. So I've been prototyping with metal strap bracing, doing cross bracing here to see if I can take the movement out of that structure. And as I'm doing that, I've discovered a problem. So I've done 3 lots of cross bracing on the roof. I've done a square at the back here and then a square at the front. Now those 2 squares help square up and lock in this rectangle. I've then done full length strapping from corner to corner. The main movement I need to take out of this wall is that top movement. The walls have steel posts that are welded to the base of the trailer and they're not moving, but they are flexing there. This top piece is moving back and forth. So I'm using these diagonal bracings to try and stop that top part of the wall moving back and forth. But now to the problem that I've discovered. The only thing stopping this roof from moving is this end wall behind me. So this wall locked up holds these walls square here, but these diagonal bracings that are running all the way to the front are pulling on this wall. Now the problem I've discovered is because of this large window, it's actually allowing the top of this wall to move a little bit. So watch these blue tape marks when I flex the walls. These 2 pieces of foam cell were moving independently. And that means this top half of this wall is moving back and forth independent of the base. Now that's a problem because this wall here that is squaring up these side walls, but also this diagonal strap bracing here is pulling off of the top of that wall to brace that end structure. Now already with the strap bracing I've got in place, it's taken heaps of movement out and it's much, much stronger, but I've still got some movement. And the problem is, because this wall doesn't have any bracing in this large centerpiece here, that top piece can move a bit. And when those diagonals pulling on it, it allows that end to still move. But not all is lost. First of all, I think this could be braced a bit better. So I've noticed that my vertical studs that I've got here are only batten screwed in the middle. There's no batten screws until you get to the top. So this vertical stud is doing almost nothing to help try and brace up the corner of these walls. So if I screw them in better, I'm going to get better strength. Also, I can experiment with a double stud there to help make that corner post nice and strong, which will help take out some of that movement. So it's the end of the day here and I've finally finished bracing up. I've had to do a couple things to make this work. First of all, I've had to double stud these corners. So I had the top and the bottom of this end wall moving a little bit independently because I was flexing through this corner. So I've double studded this corner on both corners, which has removed a lot of that movement out of there. When I really get in and put a lot of energy into the walls, I still see a little bit of movement. I'm not going to be able to get any more out of that. So double studding has helped. I have my strapping come off these corners. This end truss is batten screwed to the end wall. I've got a problem where the strapping is going to pull the truss away from the wall. And also because I'm pulling from the middle of the wall, not at the top plate can't support the bracing. So it's just going to pull the wall in. So what I've had to do is to run these battens all the way along to brace the ends of the walls to stop them pulling in. So each batten pushes against each truss and then pulls against the opposite end where the strap's pulling back in the other direction. I've finished cross bracing the roof. I've done 3 lots of cross bracing. I've done a square at the back here, a square at the front there, and then 4 length cross bracing. I've used those 2 squares here to tune up the side of this wall here. So I can pull this strap and this strap that pulls this wall this way. And if I need to go the other way, I pull that strap and that strap, which pulls the truss back this way. And that's how I get my walls nice and straight. I've got a string line that's stepped out at each end, just using 12mm ply. So I just know that distance there from the wall to the string line needs to be 12mm. I didn't explain that one very well, but it was the end of the day. What I was doing is using these diagonal bracings here to pull this center truss till it comes in line with the ends, which straightens my wall. Then, because they're the same length, it sets the walls at a consistent distance, so both of my walls will be nice and straight. So the bracings removed a lot of movement out of the house. When I give it a shake, I still get a little bit of movement out of these walls, but I've got to put a lot more energy into it now. Unfortunately, this is as good as I can get it with the bracing. I can't get more movement out of it. Ironically, when I'm traveling, it's less of an issue. So when these walls swing around, these walls will be swung around into the front of the trailer here and they'll be pinned down the bottom. So this wall here being locked in is actually going to brace these 2 side walls. So it won't be a problem when I'm traveling, which is probably when the house is going to see the most like torsional forces. But I'm worried about just when the house is set up, getting movement, really strong winds on this side and how much it's going to move. I'm not worried about the house failing or having major issues, but I want to try and remove that movement if I can. And I'm not sure how exaggerated that movement will be when I've got some really strong winds on the side of it. I think there is one other way that I can try and brace up this house, but it's going to have to wait for later in the build. So I'm going to come back to it. Unfortunately, it's part of the design challenge of having a very large opening on the front of my trailer, and our rear window, even though now that's having less impact, still has a significant impact. The bracing I was talking about in that last bit was building in a corner brace to one of my posts into the kitchen cabinets because I don't want it visible inside the house, but that's going to be pretty tricky. So I'm going to come back to that later in the build, but I am happy with how those walls have shored up now. It's taken heaps of movement out of it, and because it's like braced up to the timber, when it does move, it sort of shock absorbs the movement. So it moves a bit, but then returns, which is really good. Next steps is I have to finish working on those swinging walls and the sliding roof. I tell you, you're going to want to see these things. They are looking so cool and I can't believe how they're coming together. So I'm pretty excited to show those to you. As always, don't hate, educate, comment down below if something helps inform people, if you see something as a video that could be improved or expanded upon. And in the meantime, go build cool stuff. I'll get back to work so I can show you the video of those walls, and I'll see you soon.